Hi, everyone. It is Marina McCoy, and I'm so excited to announce my first guests on Waste Free Chats, Jenna Baird and Jacob Powsner from Baird Farm Maple Syrup in Chittenden, Vermont. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. We're excited to be number one, too. Number one, too.
Before we get into the questions, I just had to fangirl out a little bit. I love maple syrup, and I feel very honored that my first interview for these chats are with the maple syrup company that's local to Vermont. And if you guys have ever checked out their socials, or if you haven't, you definitely should because they showcase everything I love about Vermont: farming, gardening, sugaring, nature, just all the goofy and quirkiness. Plus, it's a joy to watch because they're really funny as well. And I've learned so much from maple syrup and sugaring. So definitely check them out. Now, I wrote my questions down. So let's get started. So tell me a little bit about yourself, you guys, and the history of Baird Farm.
Yeah, so our farm's been in my family for actually it'll be 102 in like,
Wow.
right? May. Yeah. So that's kind of cool. My great grandmother bought the farm in 1918, and she made maple syrup here, but it was on a pretty small scale for herself and for neighbors and friends. And she taught my dad how to make syrup, and he just kind of was doing it on the stovetop in the house for a long time, and then did it more as a hobby and built a small sugar house and just kept expanding and expanding. And we now tap close to 12,000 trees. And it's become the main source of income on the farm. So, yeah.
For most of the past 100 years, this farm was a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And a lot of that milk went into things like Cabot cheese. But there's no more cows being milked on this farm. We do graze animals. But yeah, the main deal now is maple.
Awesome. So how many miles do you have of tapped trees?
Well, the area of Sugar Bush, which is the area of maple trees, is around 170 acres. And as far as like tubing goes, we have
it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's probably 70 to 80 miles. Some of it's doubled. It's hard to measure. But yeah, there's a lot of tubing. So modern sugaring is done not with the classic buckets you'd see like on an old Norman Rockwell postcard of Vermont, but with tubing, because it's a lot more efficient, but it's also easier on the trees for a number of reasons.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the process of making maple syrup?
Sure, yeah. So maple syrup is made in the springtime. Really, like, I think March is the heart of the season for making maple syrup. We're making maple syrup between mid-February to mid-April. A good season, it'll be like 2 months long. Shorter season, it'll be like closer to a month. With climate change, we've been creeping earlier and earlier for a number of reasons. Our winter weather is milder. That's a little tongue twister. Winter weather. So we tap trees a little bit earlier. And we tap quite a few trees, so it takes a long time to do it. But the quick snapshot of making maple syrup is every year you drill a hole into the tree. Oh, I can grab demo stuff.
Oh, look at that. That's awesome.
We're improvising. This was not planned.
See, great. I love it.
Okay, here we go.
This makes me so happy.
But, these are the spouts we use today. They're plastic. When you drill a hole into the tree, you're drilling a 5/16 diameter hole, which looks like about that. It's pretty small. We're going about 1.5 inches into the tree. This tree is too small to tap at home. Don't do this. This is just the thing we did to show tourists. And you hammer this spout in until it seeds itself. You'll hear a noise. It'll go like, dunk, 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 dunk. thump.
Oh.
And that way, it's kind of like set in the hole tight.
Hmm.
And then we wait for the weather to warm up. What Jenna's holding is a cross section, a tree cookie.
So my friend's dad actually gave this to me, and he found it in when he was cutting a tree in his backyard. But you can see the old scars of the tap holes.
Oh, wow.
And so tap holes, when you tap a tree, it actually will scar vertically. So the actual hole never heals in, which is this section here. You can kind of see it's a lot harder than, like, I don't know if you can see these.
Wow, so you could tap a tree multiple times?
Yeah. So every year we tap the same trees. So our trees have multiple old tap holes in them. But yeah, and then like I was saying, they scar vertically. So this is not actually a tap hole. These are the stained wood from previous tap holes that might have been like higher up on the tree, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really quick digression.
I love that.
So we tap trees every year. Every year we drill a hole into the tree and we pound those spouts in. Then we wait for the weather to warm up. Sugaring happens when there's a temperature change or a pressure change that goes along with it. So it's above and below freezing, above and below 32 Fahrenheit. If we get a cold night and a warm day, it will cause the sap to run. As it freezes and thaws outside, it's kind of like an ice cube in your freezer. Liquid and gas expands and contracts as it gets hot and cold. And that same pressure dynamic is happening in that part of the wood called the xylem, which is the conduit or the blood veins of the tree, let's say. And as it freezes and thaws, the sap kind of goes swoop-dee-whoop-dee up and down the tree trunk. And that's what causes it to kind of go drip, drip, drip out that open wound. So we collect all that sap, we boil it all down into syrup. We're skipping over a lot of steps. But after we boil it all down to syrup, at the end of the season, what stops us is hot weather. Essentially, the trees want to put out their leaves again. They want to start making energy. They're kind of like little solar panels, right? And a lot of the energy, sap is essentially like the energy of the tree or the vessel for holding energy. It's holding all those carbohydrates. It goes towards bud production. And this wound that we've created in the tree, right, starts to heal over. Just like if you cut yourself and the platelets rush to your wound, the tree is doing the same thing throughout the springtime. So it starts to dry up. You get less sap. And then at the end of the season, we'll go, like Jenna said, we'll pull all these spouts, and eventually the tree will heal over. It will start looking like, this isn't really one, but it'll start looking like something like this, like a little bump, like a little bit of scar tissue.
Scar tissue. Wow, very fascinating. Now, can you reuse those taps? Can you sanitize them, or because of health code stuff, you have to try to find a way to recycle them?
Yes and no. So I don't know how long of a history of sugaring they want to do, but a short general trend is that back in the day they used, way back in the day, the people who used to live in what we call Vermont now, Abenaki, they used sumac shoots. And then people who settled the land used hard
cast iron
wood first.
And
then cast iron, and then other types of metal, then eventually stainless steel. And so we use stainless steel spouts here. You pull them all and you'd scrub them and you'd boil them and you'd scrub them and you'd boil them, but you'd still get residual bacteria. And that bacteria would, when you use them again, would want to cause the tree to close its wound again, if that makes any sense. So these spouts we use today are actually called health spouts. They're actually they are easier on the tree. They're softer on the tree, if that makes any sense. A metal spout causes more damage and it causes more bacterial growth. So we can talk about this later in the interview if you want, but what I was going to mention is that all tubing is recyclable now, and some percentage of spouts are recyclable now, but there still is a need for polycarbonate recycling markets, which is a really nerdy waste stream sugaring topic.
Yeah. Well, which is good too to have that option as well. So there's another stat that I read on your website that it takes about 40 to 60 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. I wanted to see how that compared to other sugar alternatives like sugarcane and corn syrup. Is it less water intensive than those ones?
Well, it's certainly harder on water systems. Yeah. Why does it vary, Jenna?
Well, we were just talking about earlier, and I don't know a lot about other sugars and how they're made, but for maple, the sap or the trees give us sap, which is the water and has about 1.5 to 2% sugar content in it. So the process of making the syrup, we're not actually taking water to make that. We already have it, right? And then we just boil it and boil it and boil it down. And we do, I don't know, did you talk at all about the reverse osmosis process? I don't think so. So we actually take the sap, put it through a reverse osmosis machine, which essentially removes a lot of the water and brings this sugar content in the sap up to 18% sugar. And so we have that byproduct of a lot of water, which we use for cleaning tanks and equipment, and we use as much of it as we can in our operation.
Wow.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so when you make syrup, most of the water content in sap, let's think about sap. Sap's like Diet Maple Kool-Aid, essentially. It's mostly water. It has like a little bit of color to it. The later in the season it gets, like the more kombucha colored it becomes.
Good way of explaining it.
It gets a little foamy, right? Like, it has like some sugar going on. That's why it likes to foam. And it gets like a little more yellowy, let's say. Water is now being sold sometimes for new beverage companies. But essentially that water's in the tree, whereas like with sugarcane systems or with beet sugars or corn sugar, they're pretty water intensive crops. So those value-added products that you can find all over now, like you'll see maple water, as well as things like maple sap. People are both bottling up raw sap and they're bottling up the water that's been filtered out of sap. And that's good. I mean, you're putting a lot of energy into those reverse osmosis machines. So it's good that people are utilizing kind of all the byproducts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I didn't know that you guys were able to utilize so much of it. That's really awesome. And just like verifies why I use maple syrup for everything when I bake.
We do like farm tours here. So we don't do farm tours right now because there's pandemic.
Yeah.
About people traveling in groups, but normally we do farm tours, and when we do a farm tour to like a group from California, like they think it's wild that like it's so water rich, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, we have these big holding tanks. They hold around 15,000 gallons of, well, there's two, but together they hold around 15,000 gallons of sap. And so we always bring people up in between these two tanks, and we ask them how long they think it takes for one of the two tanks to fill up. So it's about like 8,000. How long does it take an 8,000 gallon tank to fill up? And a lot of them, the guesses are all over the map. Some say like 2 months, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks, but people are always really baffled by the fact that it takes, on a good day when the sap is really running, it takes about 3 hours on like a peak day, flow day.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it comes in, Jacob always says it's like a river of sugar water coming down off the mountain, like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Well, because I remember you guys posting about it too, and then you would jump in and clean it because you have like this certain boots you have to wear while cleaning things.
A lot of cleaning with food in general.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see the organic certification behind Jacob's head. Do you guys want to talk about the process of getting organic certified?
Sure. Yeah. So we got the syrup certified, I want to say like 5 years ago now. And so to begin with, we had to get a forest management plan. Right. And so we hired a forester and did all that. There's a lot of guidelines. You know, a lot of people ask what makes syrup organic, because isn't it organic anyways? I think it just, it comes straight from wild maple trees. But a lot of it has to do with maintaining the health of the sugar bush and health of the trees. So that's one of the reasons why we have the forest management plan. And then there's also an approved substance list. And so you were just talking about cleaning. So we want to make sure all of the substances that we use for cleaning are approved. Every sugar maker uses a defoamer to keep the foam down when you're boiling. And so we use a certified organic safflower oil.
Wow.
Yeah, let's pause there.
Yeah.
When sugar boils, it's like making a pot of jam, right? If you see sugar foam, and there's a lot of bubbles, right?
Yeah.
Bubbles, but these bubbles will bubble over, right? So you need something to cut that surface tension, right? So if you think of like a skim of paint, or like an oil slick, right? Imagine that like cutting over the surface of a liquid. It will suppress bubbles, which is kind of a funny thing. But we're only using a few drops for hundreds of gallons. A conventional sugar maker uses this product called Atmos 3000, which kind of is what it sounds like. It's a synthesized chemical they make out of Jersey, and that's what they test for compliance. Ideally, organic should be about soil-based sustainability, like leaving the land better than you found it. Organic program has gotten complicated in recent years, which we can learn about hydroponics and how they've been incorporated. But for the most part, organic maple is supporting kind of healthy managed woodlands throughout New England.
And then the other thing that we didn't touch on is traceability. So all of the syrup that we make and sell, we can track back to a certain drum. So like if you pulled off of a gallon of syrup off of our shelf, we have a code on the bottom where you can figure out what drum it came from. So if there's any issues, and all of our syrup is single batch syrup. So you can also tell what day we made it and the weather that was.
That's so cool.
A lot of syrup is blended, which Jenna's kind of hinting at. Like if you buy like big batch, whatever, syrup from Costco or Whole Foods, a lot of that syrup comes from farms like here. We sell to a middleman who sells to places like that. But they blend it together, normally towards the middle, to make giant batches that kind of all taste the same. Whereas here, like Jenna said, it's kind of like single batch is the closest equivalent. So like every drum is like a little bit nuanced, because in Mother Nature, like everything is a little bit different.
Yeah. That's so awesome. So what other sustainability programs do you have going on at the farm?
Maple in general is a really sustainable thing, right? I mean, like maple is kind of like a way of managing agricultural land as like a carbon sink or carbon sequestration, because the forests are so powerful.
Yeah.
And allowing like kind of like not a man versus nature, but like a man woman also with nature sort of technique. It's like, it's like a symbiotic relationship. And, sugar makers at best, aren't really touching their woods or being like kind of treading on them as lightly as possible. Other sustainability things, we kind of hinted upon the tubing recycling, this stuff, right? Because it's all over in the woods. Fun history. Back in the day, they used to use, before they started messing with tubing, and they started messing with tubing in like the late 50s through mostly the 60s, and most sugar makers didn't pick it up till the 80s. But people would go and buy medical grade tubing, like stuff made by like Johnson and like 3M and like giant corporations. It's kind of a funny story, because when there's one guy who started buying all this, like, I don't know what it was like IV heart surgery lines, like, or something.
Rolls and rolls.
Like, like, thousands of feet. And
Mhm.
like some giant pharmaceutical company like showed up at his spot in like Londonderry, Vermont, and was like, "What are you doing with all those rolls of medical
Oh
tubing?"
my
He had to explain to them that he was using them for sugar. Anyways, extremely easily. All of this you couldn't ever use to recycle. It all has a lifetime, right? Partially because of hygiene. We talk about bacteria,
Mhm.
right? Like sap is essentially sugar water, and bacteria loves sugar, right? So it
Yeah.
likes to eat and grow mold. And eventually, the tubing, like all plastic, is obsolete in that fact that it grows brittle and it breaks down. UV breaks it down, right? But now you can cut this out of your woods, and we bring ours up to the Middlebury transfer station where they basically ship it in bales out to the Midwest, where it's getting smelted down and recycled now, which it never was before, which is
Awesome.
pretty cool.
Mhm.
Great. Good on you guys for taking the extra step and bringing it to the transfer station because
Yeah,
some people
there's
just throw it
also
away.
there's also you to cut off. You're supposed to cut off the little fittings, so there's all these like harder plastic tees and connectors and everything. And I think you pay an extra fee or something anyways, long story short, my dad on the like cold miserable days that we weren't out working in the woods was like just continually clipping off. It was his pastime.
Yeah, nice way to pass the time, save money.
So it's not completely zero waste.
Hmm.
They will only accept like a certain amount of polycarbonate. Like these fittings, there's a lot of fittings in the woods, like
Yeah.
places where tubing comes to other tubing, and
Oh,
they'll
okay.
take a certain amount of it. That's what I was hinting at before when I was like, oh, like there's a need for a polycarbonate
Market.
market. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And but you guys do offer, I don't, this probably has changed because of COVID, but like you could bring in your own bottle to refill, right?
Yeah, so we during the season we were doing a bring your own jar BYOJ day, and a lot of people would bring their own mason jars and we'd fill those up. Syrup is usually when you bottle syrup, it's very, very hot. So we have done bring your own bottle and jars on our bottling days in the off season because we bottle syrup year round. So we have been doing, well, we had been doing that, and now that COVID has been here, we have been a little bit hesitant about that. But yeah,
We're hesitant. We're actually still doing it. We're filling somebody's jar tomorrow. I think it's fine as long as you're being sanitary, to be
Yeah,
honest.
like washing it before, just like what you do with the ones in your area.
Yeah, and it's all really hot packed as well. I mean, you're packing syrup at like 190 degrees ideally.
and people are
Wow.
just dropping them. People are dropping them off here, so we don't like usually have visitors in the bottling room when we're bottling anyway. So.
But we should have a longer conversation about plastic use in Vermont in the times of COVID. I'm sure you followed some of those bag bans.
Yeah, and like what the CDC just announced today
I
too
missed
about like
that.
everything being single-use plastic for the time being. But yeah, that's another another time because I could talk about plastic for a while. But to wrap things up, what is your favorite thing about maple?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about what we felt were our favorite things. But we were talking about like one of the best things about maple that we think is really cool is that it's wild,
Mhm.
and it's one of the last wild crops you can buy in the grocery store today. And we've also kind of played off of that theme in some of our value-added products where we make a wild mint-infused maple syrup and a wild spruce tip-infused maple syrup. So we're harvesting
Cool.
other wild products off the property here. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite things about it.
I like talking about maple if you didn't pick that up already. And
I know, it's so fascinating.
like I've done like a lot of tours, a lot of maple tours, but they like kind of like never get old. Like
Yeah.
even like in the past, how long has it been? Like 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Like my joy level has gone from like here to like way high. It's just talking about maple is really fun.
Well, it's good that you're doing something that you're passionate about. That's how I get about waste. People like, I don't like how much waste is produced, but I love talking about it because it's super fascinating. So that's good. And what does it mean by like a wild food? Like what are other wild foods out there?
Well, I mean, there's tons of forage foods out there, like the forests and lawns and all, the whole world around us is really edible. And a lot of that knowledge has been lost due to the commercialization and commodification of food. But like foods you can find in the grocery store, like even wild Maine blueberries. I'm not sure if you've been out to those parts of Maine, but they're fertilizing those giant fields. Or, shrooms out in the Pacific Northwest. You can buy sometimes some wild mushrooms depending on where you go to buy your wares. But for the most part, maple is one of the last kind of like truly wild products you can find.
Yeah. When you're not like monocropping and things like that. Well, awesome. Just like more reasons to eat maple syrup. Sweet. Well, thanks you guys. And if you want to tell the viewers where to find you on social, be awesome.
Yeah, on Facebook, it's Baird Farm Maple Syrup. On Instagram, at Baird Farm. We have a YouTube channel, but it's very small. But they're fun videos if you guys want to check those out too.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
Syrups for sale at bairdfarm.com.
24 hours a day, right?
That's right.
Well, thanks, you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Marina.
Thank you.